Welcome to the deep dive. You've brought us some really fascinating sources today. We're going to be looking closely at a market that, well, it touches millions, probably billions of lives daily.
That's right. We're diving into the global moisturizer market.
And we're using excerpts from a specific report, yeah. Global Moisturizer Market Analysis and Forecast 2021-2033. And the data comes from Cognitive Market Research.
Exactly. So the plan is to, sift through this data, pull out the key numbers and trends, and really try to understand what's happening between 2021 and the projections for 2033.
Looking at the global picture, but also drilling down into regions and countries and figuring out the why, the dynamics behind it all.
Precisely. The drivers, the things holding it back, the trends shaping everything.
Okay, let's unpack this, the global moisturizer market. How big are we talking? What's the overall story here?
So globally, the report puts the value at 9,836.31 million back in 2021.
Wow, okay, so just shy of $10 billion. That's substantial, just for moisturizer.
It really is. And the growth path looks pretty solid. The forecast for 2025 is $12,155 million.
Okay.
And then looking further out to 2033, the projection is $18,561 million.
18.5 billion. So it's looking at nearly doubling from that 2021 number.
Yeah, that works out to a CAGR, a compound annual growth rate of 5.434% over that whole period.
5.4%. Well, it's consistent growth, isn't it?
It definitely suggests a strong market. But, the really interesting part is when you start breaking it down.
Right, because that global number hides a lot of variation.
Exactly. The
Yeah.
growth isn't the same everywhere. Understanding the regional differences, that's where you really see the dynamics at play.
Absolutely. So where should we start? Maybe North America. It's usually a big one.
Good place to start. North America is, a major chunk. In 2021, the report has it at 2,815.15 million.
Okay, almost 3 billion. And the forecast.
Growing to 3,381.52 million in 2025, and then the projection for 2033 is nearly 5 billion, 4,996.61 million.
And within North America, I'm guessing the U.S. dominates?
Oh, by a long shot, yeah. The U.S. market alone was 2,273.52 million in 2021.
Wow, so the vast majority of the North American total.
Right, and it's projected to hit almost 4 billion by 2033, 3,990.29 million. So even though it's a mature market, it's still adding a lot of value.
Still growing significantly. What about Canada and Mexico? How do they feature?
Canada shows, steady upward movement from $367.0 million in 2021 up to $681.54 million projected for 2033.
Okay.
And Mexico, starting smaller at $174.54 million, it also shows solid growth, aiming for $324.78 million by 2033.
So North America, large, established, but still expanding nicely. Let's hop across the Atlantic. Europe, how does it stack up?
Europe's another key region, a bit smaller than North America overall, though. The 2021 value was $2,144.32 million.
Right.
That's expected to rise to $2,576.86 million in 2025, and the forecast for 2033 is $3,879.24 million.
Again, solid growth across the region. The source lists quite a few European countries. Any standouts or specific trends there? Does it connect back to things like, changing habits?
It does seem to. You see strong absolute growth in places like Germany that's projected to go from $375 million in 2021 to over $720 million by 2033.
Big market.
Yeah. And the UK and France are significant too, both projected well over $350 million, $457 million for the UK, and $384 million for France by 2033.
Okay.
But what caught my eye, and maybe links to those dynamics, is the rest of Europe category.
Yes. The report flagged that one. Says it's among the fastest growing.
Exactly. It started at $388 million in 2021 and is projected to hit over $800 million by 2033. That's more than doubling.
So faster growth than the big Western European economies, percentage-wise at least. Any ideas why?
Well, the report doesn't specify the exact countries driving it, but
Yeah.
you could speculate, right? It might be linked to increasing skincare awareness kicking in, or maybe rising incomes in some Eastern or Southern European countries, kind of like the dynamics we'll see elsewhere.
Right, so just growth isn't just concentrated in the usual places. Pockets of faster change.
Precisely. Okay, moving on. Asia Pacific. This looks like the giant in the room, based on the numbers.
It really does. The figures here are huge.
Yeah, it was actually the largest region back in 2021, valued at $3,609.93 million.
Ahead of North America even then.
Yep. And the forecast for 2033 is massive, $7,183.09 million. This is really where a lot of the most dramatic growth is happening.
And I see China is highlighted as the surging market leader.
Absolutely. China's numbers are just phenomenal. It was already at $1,393 million in 2021
Almost 1.4 billion.
and projected to reach $2,880 million by 2033. Just huge expansion.
And this seems to tie directly back to those market drivers the report mentions, like the expanding middle class, social media.
Exactly. You've got more people with disposable income, plus the massive reach of e-commerce and social media, making these products, much more visible and accessible than ever before.
That connection is clear. Now, India is another one flagged as rising sharply.
It really is. India started at $657 million in 2021. The projection for 2033 is $1,400 million.
So more than doubling as well.
Yeah, a very sharp rise. And likely for similar reasons as China, growing incomes, urbanization, more awareness driven by digital access.
Is it mainly new users coming into the market, or people using more, or maybe upgrading?
Probably a mix of all three in places like India and China. You get first-time buyers, people incorporating moisturizer into their routine more regularly, and others trading up to maybe more premium products as their awareness and income grow.
Makes sense. What about the more established Asian markets like Japan and South Korea? They're often trendsetters.
They show solid growth, too.
Mm-hmm.
Japan goes from about $410 million to $758 million by 2033. South Korea, obviously huge in skincare influence, grows from $209 million to $344 million.
Still growing, but maybe a different kind of growth.
Potentially. In these mature markets, growth might be driven more by innovation, new formulations, premium offerings, rather than just adding millions of new users like in China or India.
Okay. The report also breaks out Southeast Asia, Taiwan, Australia.
Right. Southeast Asia as a whole shows strong growth from $544 million to over $1 billion projected by 2033. Taiwan follows a similar upward path. Australia shows more, let's say, moderate growth, but still growing steadily.
So the picture in APAC is definitely one of massive scale and rapid expansion, really leading the global growth charge.
Without a doubt, it's the engine room based on these projections.
Okay, let's shift focus. South America, how does that region look?
South America is smaller in absolute terms, naturally, compared to APAC or North America, but the rate of growth is really noticeable.
Oh, what are the numbers?
It was $590 million in 2021, but it's projected to hit $1,354 million by 2033.
So more than doubling over the forecast period. That's significant acceleration. Brazil leads there, I'd assume.
Yes, Brazil is the biggest player, projected to go from $204 million to about $477 million. But the report also shows really strong percentage growth in countries like Argentina, Colombia, Peru, Chile.
So again, reflecting that expanding middle class, perhaps.
Seems likely. Argentina, for instance, is projected to more than double its market size by 2033. Colombia, Peru, Chile, all showing substantial increases.
Impressive growth rates across South America, then. How about the Middle East?
The Middle East market is forecast to grow from $428 million in 2021 to $716 million by 2033.
Okay. Any particular leaders?
Saudi Arabia is the largest, projected to reach $285 million. Turkey and the UAE also show solid growth. The report mentions steady expansion in Egypt and Qatar, too.
Maybe driven by climate needs or just rising incomes generally?
Could be a combination. Plus, growing awareness like everywhere else.
And finally, Africa.
Africa is the smallest regional market in this breakdown, starting at $247 million in 2021.
And projected growth.
Projected to reach $430 million by 2033. So, growing, but starting from a lower base.
Which countries are mentioned there?
South Africa is the largest listed, going from $108 million to $185 million. Nigeria also shows strong growth, projected to go from $62 million to $110 million. The Rest Africa segment also grows significantly.
Okay, so we've journeyed around the globe looking at the numbers. We see these huge variations in scale and growth rates. Now, let's tie it back to the why. According to the report, what are the core forces, the dynamics driving all this?
Right, connecting the dots. The report points to some fundamental drivers. First, just rising awareness of skincare, people understanding the benefits.
Basic, but crucial.
Absolutely. Then, the expanding middle class globally, more people with disposable income to spend on these kinds of products.
We saw that reflected in the rapid growth in APAC and South America especially.
Exactly. Another big one is the shift towards natural and organic products, a major consumer preference trend. And finally, the huge influence of social media and e-commerce. They drive awareness and make buying easier than ever.
Those drivers make a lot of sense given the growth patterns. What about the flip side? What's holding the market back? The restraints.
The report mentions a couple of key things. One is simply high product costs, which can still be a barrier, particularly in some emerging economies.
Right, affordability.
And then, interestingly, market saturation in the really developed countries,
Saturation, meaning.
meaning almost everyone who is likely to use a moisturizer already is. So it's harder to find brand new users. Growth has to come from somewhere else.
Ah, I see. So you can't just rely on adding new customers indefinitely.
Right. And the third restraint mentioned is consumer concerns about ingredient safety. People are paying more attention to what's in the products, demanding transparency.
That saturation point is really interesting. If you can't easily get new users in, say, the US or Western Europe, how do companies grow there? Does the report link this to any specific trends?
It does, implicitly. This is where trends become crucial for growth in mature markets. It shifts from acquiring new users to increasing the value per user
How so?
through trends like clean beauty, the demand for natural, perceived, safer ingredients, or personalized skincare products tailored to very specific needs.
So more specialized, potentially higher priced products.
Exactly. These trends allow for innovation and premiumization. You introduce a new serum, a specialized night cream, something clean or personalized, and you maintain value growth, even if the number of people buying basic moisturizer isn't increasing much.
That makes sense. It's about getting existing users to spend more or buy more specialized things. Any other major trends highlighted?
Yeah, the report also mentions hybrid cosmetics products doing more than just moisturizing, maybe adding sun protection or anti-pollution benefits or even wellness aspects.
Multitaskers.
Kind of. And another really significant trend, the rise of local brands.
Ah, interesting. Not just the global giant.
No. These local players are gaining ground, especially in diverse regions. They might connect better culturally, use local ingredients, or have a strong sustainability story that really resonates with consumers in that specific place.
That's fascinating. So the global market isn't entirely homogenous. Local tastes and values are creating opportunities for smaller regional brands.
Precisely.
Mm.
You see how it all links together. The rapid growth in APAC ties to the middle class and digital drivers. The trends like clean beauty and personalization help explain continued value growth in mature markets. And the rise of local brands shows how companies adapt to specific regional nuances.
It paints a picture of a really dynamic interplay between these big global forces and very specific local factors. And just to reiterate for everyone listening, all these numbers, the regional details, the drivers and trends, this is all coming directly from those excerpts of the cognitive market research report we mentioned.
That's correct. Our discussion is grounded entirely in that source material.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful. We've covered the sheer scale of the global moisturizer market, its steady projected growth, and crucially, the mix of forces shaping it from economic shifts to changing consumer values around health, nature, and personalization.
And how those forces play out so differently across the world.
Exactly. So, building on all that, here's a final thought for you, our listeners, to consider. We've talked about personalization and the rise of local brands catering to specific needs and cultures. Given that, how might the very definition of a moisturizer start to diverge across different regions over the next decade? Could we see entirely new categories emerge, maybe focused on extreme climate protection in one region, or traditional botanical blends in another that look quite different from the lotions and creams we think of today? What new needs might shape the future of skin hydration?
That's a really interesting question. The future might be less about a single global standard and more about a diverse ecosystem of solutions.
Food for thought indeed. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of moisturizers. We hope exploring this data with us has been valuable.
All right, let's dive in. Today, we're exploring a market that touches literally billions of people every single day. It's probably sitting in your bathroom cabinet right now.
That's right, we're looking at the global moisturizer market. And the source material you've brought us for this deep dive is particularly interesting excerpts from the Global Moisturizer Market Analysis and Forecast 2021-2033 report by Cognitive Market Research.
Exactly. So our mission here is to take this detailed report data, kind of strip away the noise, and find the core insights. What was this market worth? Where is it heading by 2033? And maybe most importantly, what are the underlying dynamics driving all that change globally and, region by region?
We're going to pull out the key numbers, look at the growth trajectories, and try to connect the dots between the data and the market forces the report identifies.
Perfect. Let's start with the big picture then, the global scale. How big was the moisturizer market back in 2021, according to this report, and where's it projected to go?
So globally, the report valued the market at just under $10 billion in 2021, 9,836.31 million to be precise.
Wow. Nearly $10 billion just for moisturizers. That's a massive foundation.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? And the growth forecast is strong. It's projected to reach over $18.5 billion by 2033, heading $18,561 million.
So looking at it almost doubling in value over that period.
Right. And that represents a compound annual growth rate, or CAGR, of around 5.4% across the entire forecast period. That's a pretty consistent, healthy growth rate for a market of this size.
A steady upward trajectory globally. But as we know, global numbers can hide vastly different stories underneath. The real insight often comes when you break it down by region, right?
Absolutely. The report gives us a fantastic regional view, and yeah, the dynamics vary significantly.
Okay, let's start with North America. It's typically a huge market for consumer goods. How does it fare here?
North America is indeed a major player. The report shows it valued at over $2.8 billion in 2021 and projected to grow to nearly $5 billion by 2033.
Almost doubling, similar to the global rate then.
Yes, solid growth. And within that, the U.S. is, the dominant force, making up the vast majority of the region's value, over $2.2 billion in 2021, projected to reach nearly $4 billion by 2033.
So the U.S. market, while likely quite mature, it's still adding significant absolute value year after year. It's not stagnant at all.
Precisely. It's adding value even if the rate of adding new users might be slower than elsewhere. Canada and Mexico show steady upward movement, too. Canada projected to reach over $680 million and Mexico over $320 million by 2033.
Okay.
So North America overall, large, established, and continuing its healthy expansion.
Okay, got it. Let's look across the Atlantic to Europe. How does that region compare?
Europe is another key region, maybe a bit smaller in scale than North America. The report shows it at around $244 million in 2021, projected to grow to nearly $3.9 billion by 2033.
A substantial increase there as well. Interesting. The report highlights a few countries like Germany, the UK, and France as significant.
They are indeed major markets in Europe. Germany alone is projected to reach over $720 million by 2033, and the UK and France are forecast to be well over $350 million each.
Right.
These are large, established markets where growth dynamics might be driven more by trends than just getting new users.
That makes sense. In saturated markets, growth often comes from people buying more specialized
Yeah.
or like higher value products, right?
Exactly. And interestingly, the report specifically flags the rest of Europe category as one of the fastest growing segments within Europe. It's projected to more than double from around $388 million in 2021 to over $800 million by 2033.
More than doubling. So faster percentage growth in the big Western European economies. What might be driving that acceleration in other parts of Europe?
Well, the report doesn't pinpoint specific countries in that rest of category, but it likely ties back to those broader market drivers we'll discuss later. Maybe increasing skincare awareness, rising disposable incomes, or greater digital access making products available in areas where they weren't before. It shows growth isn't just concentrated in the traditional powerhouses.
That's a great example of how the regional detail reveals different stories within the overall picture. Now let's talk about Asia Pacific. Based on these numbers, this looks like the true powerhouse and, well, the engine of global growth.
Without a doubt. APAC was already the largest region in 2021 at over $3.6 billion, and its projected value for 2033 is massive, over $7.1 billion. This is where you see some of the most dramatic expansion happening.
And China is leading that charge with just phenomenal growth figures.
Absolutely. China's market was over $1.3 billion in 2021 and is forecast to more than double, actually nearly double to over $2.8 billion by 2033. This kind of expansion is directly linked to key drivers identified in the report.
Like the massive growth of the middle class and the ubiquitous influence of social media and e-commerce.
Precisely. You have millions more people with the income to spend on skincare, and digital platforms make these products incredibly visible, desirable, and just easy to purchase across a huge population base.
That connection is incredibly clear in those numbers. And India is showing a similar, really sharp rise.
India's growth is also explosive. From around $657 million in 2021, it's projected to more than double to $1.4 billion by 2033.
Wow.
Again, likely driven by similar factors: growing incomes, increasing urbanization, and digital access expanding the market reach.
So in places like China and India, is the growth primarily driven by sheer volume, just millions of new users entering the market?
A large part of it, yes. But it's probably a mix, you're getting first-time buyers, people integrating moisturizer into a more regular routine, and increasingly consumers trading up to more premium or specialized products as their income and awareness grow.
Right.
It's not just adding new customers, it's also about increasing usage and value per customer within that rapidly expanding base.
What about more established markets in APAC, like Japan and South Korea? They have strong skincare cultures already.
They show solid growth, but perhaps driven by slightly different dynamics than the mass expansion in China or India. Japan goes from around $410 million to over $750 million by 2033. South Korea, a massive trendsetter in skincare, shows significant growth from maybe a smaller base, projected to reach over $340 million by 2033.
So maybe less about adding millions of new users and more about innovation, new formulations, premiumization, catering to sophisticated consumers?
That's a strong possibility. Yeah. In mature markets with high awareness, growth often comes from innovation, specialized products targeting specific needs, rather than just basic penetration. The report also mentions strong growth in Southeast Asia, projected to pass the billion-dollar mark,
A billion, okay.
and steady upward trends in Taiwan and Australia too.
So APAC is characterized by sheer scale and rapid expansion, fueled by this blend of new users, increasing usage, and trading up, all amplified by digital access and economic growth. It's definitely the engine room of global growth based on these numbers.
So the data certainly supports that conclusion, yeah.
Let's shift down to South America. How does that region feature?
South America is smaller in absolute terms compared to the giants, starting at around $590 million in 2021. But the report highlights a really noticeable rate of growth here.
What kind of growth are we talking about?
It's projected to more than double by 2033, reaching over $1.3 billion. That's a significant acceleration in value.
More than doubling from a smaller base still represents substantial growth. Brazil is likely the largest player there.
Yes, Brazil is the biggest market mentioned, projected to reach nearly $480 million by 2033. But the report also points to strong percentage growth in other countries like Argentina, Colombia, Peru, and Chile.
Again, does this link back to that expanding middle-class dynamic we saw in parts of APAC?
It seems very likely. The report data suggests that as disposable incomes rise in these economies, skincare, including moisturizers, becomes more accessible and integrated into consumer routines. Argentina, for example, is projected to more than double its market size.
Right. So South America demonstrating significant acceleration driven by similar economic shifts seen elsewhere. Okay, moving on, the Middle East.
The Middle East market is forecast to grow from around $428 million in 2021 to over $716 million by 2033.
And what are the leading countries in that region?
Saudi Arabia is the largest market listed, projected to reach over $285 million. Turkey and the UAE also show solid growth, and the report notes steady expansion in countries like Egypt and Qatar.
Okay, and finally Africa.
Africa is the smallest regional market in the breakdown, starting at around $247 million in 2021 and projected to reach $430 million by 2033. So it's growing, but yeah, from a lower base compared to other regions.
Which countries are specifically mentioned there?
South Africa is listed as the largest market in Africa, projected to grow from $108 million to over $185 million. Nigeria shows strong growth too, projected to nearly double from $62 million to $110 million. The West Africa segment also shows significant growth.
Okay, so we've looked at the numbers globally and seen how they manifest very differently across these diverse regions, from these rapid expansion engines to more mature, steadily growing markets. This brings us back to the why. The report identifies several key drivers behind all this, right?
Right. Beyond the raw numbers, it's understanding the forces shaping them. The report highlights several fundamental drivers. First, just rising awareness of skincare benefits globally. People are increasingly understanding the importance of skin health and protection.
That's the foundational piece, isn't it? Awareness leading to demand.
Exactly. Coupled with the expanding global middle class. More disposable income means more people can afford these products, moving them maybe from a luxury to a routine purchase.
And we saw the impact of that so clearly in the rapid growth regions like APAC and South America.
Absolutely. Another major driver is the significant shift toward natural and organic products. Consumers are demanding cleaner formulations, often influenced by health and environmental concerns.
That's a huge trend impacting so many consumer goods categories.
It is, and it's strongly present in moisturizer. And then there's the undeniable influence of social media and e-commerce, which drives product discovery, creates desire, and makes buying easier than ever, especially across vast distances or, in areas with less traditional retail infrastructure.
Those four drivers, awareness, income, ingredient preference, and digital access, seem to underpin a lot of the growth we've observed. But the market isn't without challenges. The report also mentions restraints.
Yes, factors that can hold back this growth. One is simply high product costs. Premium moisturizers can be expensive, which remains a barrier for consumers in many emerging economies or lower income segments.
Affordability is always a factor, yeah.
And then, interestingly, market saturation in highly developed countries. As we touched on, in places like the US or Western Europe, most people who are likely to use moisturizer already do.
So the challenge shifts from attracting new users
Yeah.
to something else.
Precisely. The market isn't getting dramatically bigger by adding new faces, so companies have to find other ways to grow revenue. And the third restraint mentioned is growing consumer concerns about ingredient safety. This isn't just about preference for natural, it's about mistrust or caution regarding certain chemicals, leading to demand for transparency and sometimes hesitancy about new
Yeah.
products.
That saturation point is really key for mature markets. If adding new users isn't the primary growth engine, how do companies in those regions maintain their value growth? Does the report link this saturation challenge to specific market trends?
It does, yeah. This is where many of the key trends become strategies to overcome saturation. If you can't sell basic moisturizer to entirely new people, you encourage existing users to buy more often, or buy higher value products.
And the trends enable that.
Exactly. Trends like the demand for clean beauty formulations or increasingly personalized skincare products. These aren't just buzzwords, they allow for innovation. You can introduce a new specialized serum with clean ingredients targeting a specific concern, or maybe a moisturizer tailored for a very particular skin type or environmental factor.
And those tend to be higher priced premium offerings.
Often, yes. They allow companies to maintain or increase the average revenue per user, even if the total number of users isn't surging. It shifts the growth strategy in mature markets towards premiumization, specialization, and innovation based on specific consumer demands like clean ingredients or personalization.
So trends aren't just about what's popular, they're directly tied to how the market grows, especially in different regional contexts. That's really interesting.
Precisely. The report also mentions other major trends like hybrid cosmetics products combining moisturizing with other benefits like SPF or anti-pollution effects.
Multitasking products make sense.
Right. Consumers want more efficiency. And another really significant trend highlighted is the rise of local brands.
That's fascinating. We often think of the huge global beauty giants.
And they are huge players, absolutely, but local brands are gaining significant traction, especially in diverse regions like APAC and South America. They can often connect more authentically with local culture, use regionally relevant ingredients, or tap into local sustainability values in a way global brands might struggle with.
So the market isn't monolithic at all. Local nuances and preferences are creating real opportunities for regional players.
It shows a dynamic interplay, doesn't it? The rapid volume growth in APAC and South America is fueled by economic expansion and digital access. The value growth in mature markets like North America and Europe is increasingly driven by trends like clean beauty and personalization, which enable premiumization. And the rise of local brands highlights the importance of cultural relevance and specificity.
It really is a complex but fascinating global picture, driven by this blend of universal forces like rising incomes and specific consumer demands and technological shifts. And it's important just to reiterate for you, our listener, that everything we've discussed, the numbers, the regions, the drivers, restraints, and trends, comes directly from the excerpts of that cognitive market research report you shared earlier.
That's correct. Our discussion is based entirely on the insights and data presented in that source material.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We've seen the immense scale of the global moisturizer market, understood its steady projected growth, and really unpacked the differing forces shaping it from fundamental economic development and digital access driving volume in some regions to consumer demands for clean ingredients and personalization driving value in others.
And how those dynamics create unique market characteristics in different parts of the world, it's quite varied.
Absolutely. So, building on that, here's a final thought for you to consider. We've talked about personalization and the rise of local brands catering to specific needs and cultural preferences. Given this increasing focus on tailoring products, how might the very definition of what a moisturizer is start to diverge across different regions over the next decade?
That's a great question. Like, will moisturizers still mean the same thing everywhere or feel the same?
Exactly. Could we see entirely new categories emerge? Maybe products focused on extreme climate protection in, say, parts of Africa or the Middle East that look very different from what's popular in Europe. Or formulations based on traditional botanicals that gain prominence through local brands in Asia or South America. What specific unmet needs might shape the future of skin hydration, leading to products that we might not even categorize as moisturizer today?
The future market could be defined less by a single product type, maybe, and more by a diverse ecosystem of hydration and skin health solutions tailored to very specific regional contexts and consumer values.
Something to mull over as you look at your own skincare shelf, perhaps. Thank you for exploring this fascinating market with us on the deep dive. We hope peeling back the layers of this data has been valuable for you